Please bear with us if we run into any technical difficulties, because there is always some problem with this online meeting. So we still haven't had one of our speakers on the board, but I think probably he will join us. But anyway, good evening to every one of you, those who are joining this session. My name is Phurba Lhendup, and I work here at the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific at the Asian Institute of Technology here in Thailand. I'm very happy today to be the moderator of this session, and let me welcome all of you for taking your time to join this session. Now, our session, as you might have probably read or heard, is called Adapting to Climate Change, Strengthening Urban Water Resilience. This is just a 1-hour session, and it's pretty much short, and it will start with the keynote address followed by 4 PowerPoint presentations and question and answer session. And for the question and answer session, we would like to request you to type your questions if you have any, and in case if you would like to direct your questions to a particular person, please kindly indicate his or her name in the parentheses, or either at the end or at the last end of your question, at the beginning of your question. We'll do our best to address your questions, and if time permits us, however, if time does not permit us to do that, please apologize us, but we'll be very happy to hear you through email. So in the panel today, we have Dr. Naoya Tsukamoto, who is the director of the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific here at the Asian Institute of Technology. And then we have Mr. Armin Rostomen, who is also working here at the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific as the Senior Program Specialist, but he is connecting us today from Austria in Vienna, in Austria. And then next speaker, we have Ms. Kay Kiang Kyo, who is a model developer with Hydro-Informatics Institute here in Bangkok, Thailand, connecting also from Thailand. And then we have Dr. Mohammad Mumtaz, who is a professor at the University of Haripur in Pakistan. He's not still on board, I think. He will be joining shortly, I suppose. And he's going to connect us from Pakistan. Then the fifth speaker we have today is Ms. Nazwa Tasin, who is a research fellow at the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, and she is connecting us with us from Dhaka. And then, of course, we have finally my friend Asmita Poudel, who will be co-moderating this session. So now to start with, since we don't have much time, I would like to give a brief background on our session today. We all know that now water is one of the most important natural resources that has come to the forefront as a shortage. And there is now a general consensus that water scarcity is increasing, especially due to rapid expansion, urban expansion, and other forms of unplanned land use changes. And then on top of that, because of the climate change, it further exacerbates the process. So due to these challenges, many cities or urban residents are imposing, the government and agencies there are imposing water restrictions on communities and users. And this has often in the past has led to conflicts and also political instability. And the other aspects of challenges with regard to water is that there has been a sustained rise in frequency in number of water-related disasters, such as flood, landslide, typhoon, etc. So both water scarcity and water-related disaster puts us and our economic growth on the risks, and also we cannot achieve this poverty reduction, and also it undermines the achievements of our sustainable development goal. Therefore, urban water resilience is very crucial for building sustainable, adaptive, and resilient water system. So our session today intend to provide information on urban water resilience and related issues, including vulnerability and resilient assessment, tools and approaches to facilitate discussion on key challenges in water-related disaster and disaster risk reduction, and also climate change. In particular, the session will provide or share case studies from 3 different countries, Thailand, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and we'll try to provoke a discussion on how best to address identified management aspects and capacity gaps in the region. So now to start, I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Naoya Tsukamoto, who is the Director of the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific, to kindly deliver his keynote address. Nao-san, please.
Thank you, Phurba. Distinguished participants, speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific of the Asian Institute of Technology, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you on this session, Adapting to Climate Change, Strengthening Urban Water Resilience. I would like to express my gratitude to WSCC organizers and our session speakers for their inputs and collaboration to realize this session. Please let me say a few words about our center. RRCAP was established 31 years ago as a joint initiative of both AIT and UN Environment. RRCAP aims to bridge the gap between the scientific understanding and policy implementation. Acting as a science policy platform through regional networking, RRCAP has been providing capacity building, knowledge sharing, policy development support for our stakeholders in the region to achieve sustainable development from the environment aspect. Coming back to the theme of this session, recently we have been experiencing increasing frequency in the number of climate-related disasters, such as floods and droughts. While climate change will cause negative impacts to moderate and stable precipitation, urban growth limits drainage capacity and increases pressure on urban water supply demands. Climate change and rapid urbanization pose a serious risk to provision of urban water services, including safe drinking water, sanitation, and safe drainage, in particular to vulnerable groups, including the poor and informal settlers in urban areas. There is an estimation that the global average annual loss from disasters will increase from an annual average of $260 billion in 2015 to $414 billion by 2030, or 60% increase in 15 years, which will lead to various risks from economic growth, poverty reduction, and environmental protection to the peace of regions and the world. Water-related disasters account for almost 90% of the 1,000 most disastrous events that had taken place since 1990. Therefore, it is an urgent agenda for countries, communities, and individuals to step up their investments in the resilience of urban water systems and water resources. Business as usual practices will not be sufficient or even inappropriate for the future due to the global population growth with increasing demand of water, energy, food, and the negative impacts of climate change. Cities are at the forefront of challenges to develop sustainable and resilient water provision to people. The solutions require greater engagement of civil society, academia, private sector, diverse stakeholder groups, and those from outside of the water sector. Using multi-stakeholder approach will also contribute to innovation and creation of business opportunities and economic development. I do hope that this session will provide a good opportunity for us to share information, best practices, successful methodologies, and new approaches towards water secure and climate resilient urban development. And wish you all to have an interesting and fruitful session today. I warmly welcome you again.
Thank you very much, Nao-san, for your keynote address. Now, to kickstart the presentation, I would like to invite my colleague Armin Rostomian to kindly make his presentation. His presentation is on adapting to climate change, strengthening urban water resilience, and his presentation will basically set the scene on the concept of urban water resilience and some of the challenges that have been faced at the global and also at the local level. Armin, the floor is yours, please. We cannot hear you, Armin. You're muted. Armin, we cannot hear you. He's on mute, no?
Okay, now I sorted this issue. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Phurba, for introduction. Let me share my presentation with you. I wonder if you can see it on screen.
Yeah, yes, we can see your presentation. You are ready to go ahead.
So, dear session participants, colleagues, I would like to share with you during my presentation some key challenges in building urban resilience in Asia and Pacific region. I also will share with you some messages and recommendations we received from city government officials and other stakeholders that were solicited through our Regional Resource Center for Asia Pacific series of regional training and training of trainers workshops focused on how to address these issues and challenges. And I will also try to share with you RRCAP's initiatives and plans in 2021 focused on strengthening urban water resilience. So let's speak a little bit about challenges in building urban water resilience in Asia region with specific focus on cities. United Nations demographers estimate that Asia and the Pacific became majority urban for the first time in history in 2019, with more than 50% of the region's population living in cities. Region's urban population exceeded 2.3 billion, comprising 54% of all urbanities on the planet. The region's number of urban dwellers is expected to rise to more than 2.8 billion in 2030 and reach nearly 3.5 billion in 2050. You can see also it on the table on the right part of the slide. And since many of the world cities are located in the river and coastal regions, the concentration of assets and people makes them especially vulnerable to storms, surges, and river floods. Rapid urbanization has a significant effect on microclimate, water cycle, and subsidence, because of which the consequences of increased urban flooding are among the most prominent. Over the past decades, the impact of flooding on cities has been considerable and is expected to intensify in the future. Climate change will have its direct impact on cities. On one hand, cities will be confronted with shocks and sudden impacts such as storms, typhoons, and heat waves, while on the other hand, longer-term sea level rise, average temperature increase, and long-term changes in rainfall patterns with longer dry spells will gradually increase stress factors or impacts in these areas. Four major resilience and development challenges cities face across Asia and Pacific regions can be kind of summarized as under these four clusters: natural resource management, climate change, disaster risks, and rising inequalities. These four overarching challenges are endemic to the region, from the spillover impacts of forced migration across Western Asia to existential threat of sea level rise in the Pacific Islands. Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific for the last 6 years was conducting a number of regional training events, bringing together teams of city government officials, university, academia, and climate change adaptation and the disaster reduction experts, that they will work together and try to use this opportunity to share best practices, as well as use internationally developed the disaster risk assessment, city resilience assessment tools, and develop, based on the findings of this assessment, resilient city action plans and strategies. So during these training workshops, we discuss all these issues and challenges. And here in my next few slides, I want to share with you key messages and the recommendations we received from city officials and other stakeholders through this series of regional training events. So they say that the impact of climate change on natural hazards and waterability must be well understood, communicated, and integrated into decision-making, policy, and planning processes. Cross-sectoral and integrated approaches are also needed. The issues related to agricultural practices, infrastructure, drinking water, supply, sanitation, and energy across departmental lines require collaboration of all the agencies involved in water, energy, agriculture, housing, and urban planning and disaster management. It's very also, they highlighted the importance of a greater engaging private sector, and the private sector is expansions as a part to solve all these challenges. Because most water and natural resources management issues are the responsibility of the public sector. A proactive approach to disaster risk reduction and climate change is financially sound. Every dollar spent on preparing for disaster risk reduction saves around $7 in economic losses. That's what UNDP says. So that is why it's very important to invest in disaster risk reduction measures to save much more funds when it comes for rehabilitation and reconstruction after disasters. It is also, they highlighted also a role of governance as a key to climate change adaptation. They say that responding to climate and disaster risk challenges calls for collective actions, adequate policy instruments, and financing and functional institutions for the use of local knowledge, participation of communities in decision processes, and for the capacity to mobilize materials and funding that go beyond local means. The role of governments is instrumental in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction, climate change, and integrated water resource management into policies and institutions. It is instrumental in integrating urban resilience into urban development processes and strengthening organizational capacities of municipalities, harmonizing data collection methods and knowledge and making it available to all concerned partners, building national capacities and investing in education and training, and reforming governance processes for the effective implementation of existing treaties, policies, and good practices, and for accountability. During our regional training workshops, we look at 3 levels of climate change resilience in cities: the systems levels of the cities that survive shocks and stresses, the peoples and organization level that is able to accommodate these stresses into their day-to-day decisions, and city institutional structure level that constitutes to support the capacity of people and organizations to fulfill their aims. The approach we used in these training events for strengthening cities' water resilience is comprised of following steps. Step 1, understanding the system and potential climate change impacts, engaging stakeholders to conduct city disaster risk, resilience, and water infrastructure vulnerability assessments, city water resilience strategy and action plan development, implementation and monitoring, and evaluation, learning, and adapting to reassess objectives for the next period. As I said, these training workshops we done from the period of 2016 to 2020, training over 118 participants from 24 cities, and all these training events we done in close collaboration engagement and input from our key partners such as United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UN Habitat, UNEP, UNSCAP, and EPICNet USA. We also, in terms of our engagement in this field, AITR-RCAP provided a consultant to join the drafting team and contributed to the development of UNDRR and UNSA-led World into Action Guidelines, implementation guide for addressing water-related disaster and transboundary cooperation. You see the cover page of this publication on the right part of the slide, and the link if you want to access it below. What are our plans for 2021 in the areas of adapting and strengthening urban water resilience? So I would like to tell that AITR-RCAP became an official partner organization for MCR 2030, Making Cities Resilient 2030 campaign. And also we are a member of MCR 2030 Regional Coordination Committee for Asia and Pacific region. The latest stage of this Making Cities Resilient campaign that started in 2010 and has been extended up on October 2020 till 2030 was launched in October 2020. AITR-RCAP also plan to the training workshop we plan to convene in 2021 on strengthening cities resilient to climate and disaster risk. This year, because of pandemic, will be in virtual online format. We are trying to develop an online course and put all these training course materials to make it interactive, mobile devices compatible online course that greater number of people can access it and take it. We also work in close collaboration with other partners of MCR 2030 to develop more a series of webinars and online sessions on this specific area. Also, we do emphasize the importance of knowledge sharing via development of series of case studies with umbrella synthesis report, aiming to share best practice, to capture, document, and share best practices, experience, and lessons learned. I stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Armin, for your presentation. Next presentation, I would like to request Ms. K from the Hydro-Informatics Institute here in Thailand, Bangkok, to make a presentation on the web-based interface for urban flooding warning system in Bangkok.
Hello.
Yeah,
Let me share my screen. Yes.
Yes, we can see your screen now. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you go to slide mode, full slide mode?
Okay.
Yes, now you're ready to go.
Okay.
Yes, good. Please start.
Thank you. Yeah, hello. I'm Kay. I'm a model developer from Hydro-Informatics Institute of Thailand. Today, I would like to talk about web-based interface for urban flood warning system in Bangkok area. So, first of all, in Bangkok, floods are caused by two main factors. The first is due to precipitations, which is about meteorological cause. There are two types of precipitations. 30% came from the southwest monsoons from the Indian Ocean between May and October, and 70% came from the conventional rain. And another reason is because of the physical reasons. As you know, the Bangkok is a completely paved city, so the runoff is very fast, and also it is because of garbage blocked in the shore canals and pipes. So this is the objective of our study. The first one is to develop our flood warning system by integrating the flood guidance threshold with 1 hour nowcasting rainfall from the weather radar. And the second one is to develop web-based interface which can warn urban flood area in every 5 minutes based on the operating urban flood forecasting system. The study area is in the Bangkok area, and we do the catchment delineation based on polders and based on district boundary and based on flood area followed by roads and streets, and also based on flood duration of flooded water. This is the methodology of our flood forecasting, our flood warning system. The accumulated rainfall is calculated for every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 1 hour to be consistent with the time of flooding in urban areas. And the catchments are delineated. Then the rainfall is calculated for each catchment in 15, 30, 45, and 1 hour. In the operating system, if the rainfall reached the specified criteria, it will alert the areas as flood risk area. And these systems will perform the display through a web-based interface. Just now, we try to run at sub-district level, and later on we will try to display the name of the street as well. So this is the interface that we develop. When we enter, we will see the latest situations. Right now, there is no urban flood, so that no data is available in the table. But if there is flood, the flood risk area will pop up like this. The interesting thing is that our system can show the historical data. On the right-hand side, we can choose the specific dates and we can check the flood extents. It can show the flood, what's happened in which province, in which district, and in which sub-district, and the amount of rainfall intensity and the warning count. Moreover, we can export these results into CSV file type, Excel, PDF, and shapefiles. So it is necessary to check the accuracy of our urban flood warning system. We evaluate based on events. On 24 July 2020, there were heavy rains around Bangkok. Our system coincides with flood affected in 6 districts, which is about, the POD is about 86%. POD is probability of detection is about 86%, and the false alarm rate is 79%, and the overall accuracy is around 70%. And also on 28 August 2020, the alert system coincides with the flood event in 2 districts, which is around 33% accurate in POD, and overall is 92%. On the same line, with 1st September 2020 events, the point of detection is 91%, the false alarm rate is 75%, and the accuracy is 60%. It is also the same for the accuracy is on 23rd September 2020. The overall accuracy is around 58. Overall accuracy is around 58%. So because of the fact that our flood warning system reported an average of 77% of accurate occurrence PODs, while an average of 73% of false alarm were issued. Even if the system can warn more than 70% of the accurate event, it still has a high warning error, so that our system should improve the warning threshold to be more accurate. So thank you so much. This is our presentation from HII. If you want to know more, you can contact our modeling team, hims@hii.or.th. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kay, for your presentation. I think it's quite an interesting presentation. I think because in terms of such disasters, I think such tools are very useful for us. And this is a web-based tool which can be accessed through internet browser or something like that. So it's going to be very useful. And then if you have any questions or you want to reach our respective presenter, you are always welcome to put in the chat box. And as you can see that my colleague is sort of filling in the chat box every time we have a presenter here. So the biodata and their research interests and websites are being provided there. So please check the chat box. And now let me invite our colleague from Bangladesh, Ms. Nazwat Tasin, who is a research fellow at the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology in Dhaka. And her presentations will be understanding water insecurity dynamics in slums of Dhaka. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Let me share my screen first. Can you guys see?
Microphone in the hand. Yeah, the presentation is ready.
Okay. Thank you so much. So my name is Nazwat Tasin. I'm from Institute of Water and Flood Management from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. And today I'm going to talk about the research we've done on understanding water insecurity dynamics in slums of Dhaka. Now, let me first introduce you to the city of Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh. It is one of the most densest cities on earth, and unfortunately, 40% of the population live in slums and squatters, which are even more denser than the normal residential places. Essentially, slums are like single roomed housing facilities for urban poor people. And if you look at the map of Dhaka, you'll see that as the city grew from south to north, there are slums also grew in that same direction. And almost all over the city, slums are scattered everywhere, especially concentrated in areas where we have industrial zones. So the topography, geography, and socio-economic, political context of different zones are very different. So so our hypothesis is that water insecurity is going to be very different from slum to slum. And to study that, we selected two slums. One is on the northern part of the city called Baganbari slum. It is relatively a new slum. It's very concentrated in one parcel of land, whereas the other slum is the Tejka railway slum, which is in the old industrial area of the city, almost in the central. Both of the slums are extremely densely populated, informal settlements. However, their contexts are very different, as we will see as I progress. Now, to develop this study of ours, we try to develop a water insecurity index based on a multi-criteria analysis method. Now, unfortunately, in case of slums, there is huge data inavailability issue. So we combined both secondary data alongside primary data from questionnaires, interviews, and focus group discussions. And then in terms of social, economic, and environmental dimensions, we selected a total of 9 indicators to formulate a water insecurity index. In this index, we provided equal weights for each indicators and used a standardized scoring method. Now, in terms of the indicators, we saw that in recent flooding event, the slum in the northern part had 30% of area flooding, whereas the Tejka slum, which is in the old industrial area, there was no flooding, and it doesn't even have very much of a history of flooding in the first place because of its topography and elevation. In terms of groundwater level depletion, the Tejka slum, because it is in the industrial area, it has higher rates of groundwater depletion, with an exception after 2010, because there was a revitalization project in a nearby water body that did some groundwater level augmentation. But even now, the depletion rate is extremely high in Tejka compared to the Baganbari slum, which is in the northern part. The rest of the data was collected from questionnaires, focus group discussions, and interviews, because we unfortunately didn't have secondary data, including data on water quality. So we collected water quality data from people's perception in terms of color and odor, and found that the context was very different in the two slums. The pricing was also very different. And although both slums lacked adequate number of facilities, like number of toilets, number of water supply facilities, it seemed that the Tejga slum was 4 times more severely lacking compared to the slum. And this is what we see in their performances. So the Tejga slum performed significantly well in terms of environmental factors. However, in terms of economic and social factors, its performance was very poorly compared to the Baganbari slum, the one in north. We see that the Baganbari slum didn't have any form of water burden because the price was equal to the formal residents, whereas in Tejga slum it's 17 times higher. And even in other socio-economic indicators, it was performing much poorly compared to the one. Despite being in terms of environmental factors, it was in an advantageous position. So we see that in all three dimensions, Tejga slum was water insecure, whereas Baganbari slum was significantly insecure only in terms of environmental water insecurity. And all of this combined, we see that the Tejga slum was more than 3 times more water insecure than the other slum. So the context, as we see, all of the two slums are highly densely populated, but the context was significantly different for them. So what can we interpret from this? So based on the FGDs and interviews, what our understanding was that the local politics and land ownership actually significantly impacted water insecurity or any projects that were undertaken to improve the condition of the slums. Now, when we see the Tejga slum, we saw that after 2003, there weren't any NGOs involved to do any form of project in it because the land tenure was very complicated. So to avoid legal actions, most NGOs avoided doing any form of wash-related projects in this slum. So we see a number of illegal pipelines or abandoned pumps in this slum. Aside that, we see very poorly built toilets, and also because of the slum structure, even when they're using water for cooking or cleaning, they're in a much more unhygienic position. Whereas the Baganbar slum, it has been more favored politically, and because of that, NGOs also prefer to do projects in this slum. So they have properly built toilets and also places where they can do their cleanings and like do the other water uses in a much better hygienic ways compared to the Tejga slum. And even during COVID, when the slums were facing eviction and the other problems, in Baganbari slum, there were interventions to provide them with hand washing stations and other facilities. So what can we take away from this study? Now, Dhaka Wasa, which is the water supply authority of the city, has been planning to integrate slums in their supply system to avoid water loss and illegal pipes of water. But their method it just includes, like, they just want to provide water supply with the help of NGO without integrating any community or or addressing other drainage or other water related problems. Whereas the context is significantly different. So which suggests that there is a need of specific guidelines and specific projects to ensure water security in the context of slums, because they're significantly different. And because there are a lot of data inavailability issues and problems that are not necessarily known to us, community participation and empowerment can be very useful in both in terms of developing policy and plans, and also to integrate different technologies to successfully implement water supply and drainage or water security related projects. So that's pretty much from me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Nazwa, for your presentation. It's very interesting to see your presentation, especially in terms of the interplay between different stakeholders on the issues of water in Dhaka. I think participants might have enjoyed. And of course, we actually have one presentation from Pakistan on water adaptation governance at the local level. However, our professor, for some reason, he was not able to join. I don't see him here join. So unfortunately, we won't be able to present you his study, but it's on the water governance issue in Pakistan, and then how they try to sort of like influence the policymakers, stakeholders in developing a very stringent policy in terms of managing water issues at the governance levels in Pakistan. But unfortunately, as I said, he's not able to join. We tested a few times just before, but that was looking quite fine. But however, I think probably because of some tech issues, I think, for whatever reasons. So thank you very much for all of your presentations now. And then now we will start with this question answer session. So firstly, I'll go to the chat box, and we have a question from someone called Loy Rigo. Loy, thank you so much for your question, and this question is directed to Armin. And the question is about Making City Resilience 2030 campaign. And he or she is asking, sorry for that, how do cities take up support from Making City Resilient 2030 campaign to implement actions at the city level? What tech support will GETI and MCR campaign provide to member cities? Will you broker national coalitions and partnerships? So Armin, I think since you have time, he has also kindly indicated his email address if you want to deliver it further or provide more information. But at the moment, since we have time, I would appreciate if you could kindly answer him.
Yeah, just thank you very much. I would like to specifically thank Dr. Loy Rego, whom I haven't seen for a very long period of time. He is one of the most committed specialists and experts in the field of disaster risk reduction and building cities resilience. So we're very, very glad to hear from you, Loy, and I would be really happy to write more to your email you provided in the chat. But yeah, as I mentioned that this MCR 2030 campaign, which is a continuation of Making Cities Resilient global campaign, has been initiated and officially launched in October 2020. And there are many organizations in Asia and Pacific who became, who applied to become partners for this global campaign. And definitely the focus, the pandemic puts its own limitation to not only this global campaign, but also to all other training events and capacity development events. I think what our organizations try to do, working with our key partners, Office of United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, who is coordinating this campaign, and other key partners in the region, is that we started a series of joint webinars on the key topics of MCR 2030, with specific focus on conducting assessments for disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and sharing cities' best practices and experiences in this area, as well as how to use the findings of these assessments, that people will understand their risks and come up with informed strategies and action plans built on these findings of these assessments reports. I think again another focuses of the campaign definitely in this new in this new phase of its development will be more moving from advocacy to implementation, more focus on in-the-ground implementation. I think also bearing in mind the COVID-19 is blended learning, incorporating the concept of the blended learning into all these MCR 2030 activities, which is a combination, is combining face-to-face training workshops with online events, online courses of different formats, webinars, online sessions, and definitely capturing, documenting, and sharing best practices cities in the region And then lessons learned, cities in the region experienced in making their city resilient. Definitely that would be another area of the focus of the campaign. So yeah, there are a lot of things I can share, but I would be very happy to reconnect with you through your email and maybe have a short Skype or Zoom discussions on these topics.
Thank you, Armin, for your answer, and I hope Armin has answered Dr. Loy Rigo. I think you got a very good answer from him. However, please get in touch with us because we are also, as Armin mentioned, we are closely associated with United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction on this Making City Resilient Camp in 2030. So we will be very much happy to collaborate with anybody that's interested to take this campaign forward. So thank you so much once again. Our next question from the chat box, picking up again, is from Mr. Solo Bodan. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. This question is for Kay. And he's asking, the Bangkok system that you described is based on rainfall information. Do you plan to develop an early warning system that would be based on flood forecasting, based on urban flooding modeling, either by low-resolution flood simulation in the real time or perhaps by developing a database of events pre-simulated in high resolution for a range of storms? Would you mind answering this?
Okay. Yes, for the model, we propose to be a backup in the system, and this is the real-time urban flood warning system. So as you know, urban flood is very quick and it's very fast, so that using rainfall information is more easier and faster to warn the flood risk area rather than running the model. But we will keep the model as backup. This is the answer.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope Kay has answered your question. So thank you very much for answering, Kay, and also for the question. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking question. And I would like to ask one question to Nazwa, if you don't mind. Based on your presentation, I think it might be interesting for the audience to know that how can this study help with regard to, in particular, adapting to climate change, since this session is on climate adaptation. So maybe it would be interesting for participants to know, like, how your study is going to contribute to this climate change adaptation, especially in terms of these water security issues.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. This study has been conducted in slums, like the densely populated ones. So these settlements are also the places which are more vulnerable to climate change. So when we are suggesting that this needs specific guidelines and more innovation in terms of technology and policies as well, we can integrate the context of climate change and climate migration in slums to ensure better policies in future. So I think if we can integrate different climate parameters in our water insecurity index that we have developed now, we can then in future use this same concept to study how we can create more resilient urban water system in slums for future.
Okay, thank you very much, Nazwa. I think it has been useful for the listeners. Since we still have some time for Q&A session, for the benefit of others who are listening, I think I'll ask this question to Armin once again, to go back to Armin, and maybe it's important for the participants to know, like, how cities can institutionalize this water resilient system, because there are different cities, they have different practice. So how sort of like different cities, is there a generic way of doing institutionalization of this water resilient system? You have to unmute, Armin.
Yeah, sorry, there were some issues. I had to click number of times to unmute this. But thank you for the question, Phurba. I think it's a very good and broad question on how we can institutionalize or mainstream resilience building into specifically cities policy planning and programming processes. I think the key components here is that cities will, to institutionalize it, that cities need to allocate needed financials and human resources for their city's resilient building. That's an important component. They have to put in place or establish needed structures, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation structures and positions with mandates and the clearly defined roles and responsibilities of these structures within the city systems. I think ensuring that cities are conducting on a regular basis their resilience and disaster risk assessments to know their risks and have this data on regular basis is very important in this process. Definitely developing needed strategies and action plans based on the findings of these climate and disaster risk assessments. And the important things when you design these action plans and strategies on making your cities resilient, they should not be standalone plans. They need to be incorporated into and become a component of wider city development plans. I think that's what our cities were very vocal in telling when we were discussing these particular issues at our workshops. Definitely strengthening cities' capacities in this area and ensuring that all the development programs within the city, that they will be screened through the lens of resilience and through the lens of resilience. I think that's another important component in this process of institutionalizing and mainstreaming resilience in cities.
Okay, thank you, Armin. So we have one question for Nazwa in the chat box again from Solobodan. Thank you so much for asking these questions again. He wants to know what are the difference in terms of water security between the slums in more central parts of Dhaka and those growing on the edges of the city as it is extending. You know, the slums are growing and there are like well established slums, and then there are new things coming in. So what are he basically is asking, I think, what are in terms of differences would you see there in terms of water security?
So in the central parts of city, we have extreme groundwater depletion. So that's one key factor of water insecurity in central slums. Whereas in the peripheral areas, since Dhaka has four rivers in its borders, so at the edge of the city, the slums that we have in those places, they have more drainage and issues compared to the central areas. So that's one key factor. But we need to keep in mind that slums, when they're like they have very different political context, so the interventions might favor or be against them. So that also impacts in a broader sense of how much they will be impacted by these issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Nazwa. I think it has answered, and in case if it is because I know that Nazwa is having some issue with her volume. It's not quite audible, but of course I heard it, but some people might have hearing problem. So if you happen to have any further question, please kindly email us. So thank you so much again for once again asking. And Nazwa, there is in the chat box we have a remark from Nawe-san, who is our center director, and he says that your presentation actually successfully demonstrated how to apply 3 pillars of sustainable development goal, the sustainable development from the theory level to practical use on the ground. So I think it's quite a compliment. So thank you so much again for being on the panel, and thank you so much for your compliment, Nawe-san. And we just have a few more minutes, but I would just actually like to ask one question actually to Kay again. Maybe I think the participants would be interested to know, like, what type and coverage of radar do you use in your study in that flood forecasting system? Would you mind telling the audience about that?
Hello, Phurba. The type of radar we are using is dual C-band, and the coverage is about 120 kilometer, which is located in Bangkok.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, given the time, since it's a 1 hour session, I think we have had a nice presentation. Unfortunately, as I said, like before, one of our colleagues from Pakistan, he was not able to join the call. So I think, but then nevertheless, I think we had presentation, good presentation from our colleagues, and also a good discussion. I think all the audience might have enjoyed it. And as I said before, if you have further questions, please kindly don't hesitate to inform us. So now I think I would like to close this session, and probably I think with all these three presentations, I think we have learned that building urban water resilience in the face of climate change is very crucial, and we have also seen some facts and figures on how urban areas are growing and are projected to grow, and then the pressure being put on resources such as the water. And apart from the pressure, as I said before, there are like water disaster if not being managed properly. The case studies from Thailand and also from the Bangladesh, we have seen that there are a number of issues being faced by the water sector in the countries. And in general, the water issues are being acute, and also like some of them are quite serious. So policy and planning, and also a governance mechanism, public-private sector partnership, and also I would say most importantly the community engagement, and coupled with innovation in both policy and technology and capacity building, I think are very vital in enhancing urban water resilience. And so to close this, finally, as effects of climate change are not known with certainty, many of us sometimes tend to think that we still wait until some further effects or data are available. However, uncertainty will always be a factor, and wait until more detailed data are available, we might be jeopardizing ourselves for many of our existing programs and infrastructure investments like that. So therefore, we hope that these case studies and the tools that we discussed today can be useful for everyone to replicate this study, and also to use it as some kind of information and data in your planning strategy, and so on and so forth. So as I requested before, please contact us, the individual authors, for the detailed report of that one. So lastly, with this, I would like to thank the organizer of the conference for giving us this platform, and also, of course, our speaker for consenting to deliver their talks. I know that they have involved a lot of their time and effort in doing such research. So we'd like to thank all the speakers again for their wonderful presentations. And of course, I cannot go without thanking my colleague here in my office, including my director, for their support. And we hope to see sometime later in some of our other events. We do host many webinars, events. Please follow our Facebook page, our website. And then until then, thank you so much for joining, and stay safe. Thank you so much.